have we here? Saturday, the 24th of June. I'm told it's 2023. I cannot actually verify that. I'm old, but I was not there for year zero. It is, however, noon Eastern time. I can verify that, and I'm Bob Harris, also verifiable. You've made your way to the Football Diehards YouTube channel. I believe that, too, can be verified. So there we have that, and it's time for our regular Saturday Ask Me Anything, which is, of course, an Ask Us Anything. More on that in a moment. I foreshadowed. FootballDiehards.com is the website. We appreciate you joining us here on the YouTube channel every Saturday at this time. Also on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. for On the Hot Seat live streams. Have a blast with all these. Love everyone coming around, having a little conversation. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell if you haven't already done that. If you have completed those tasks, you know the next step. Hit the like button. Hit it. Hit it right now. I'm going to hit the dislike button so everyone feels comfortable using that. We appreciate your honest feedback here at the Football Diehards YouTube channel. Hope you're all having a great day. Throw questions, comments, suggestions, any applicable associated nonsense up in the chat as well. And we'll work our way through all of that. And by we, I mean me. I'm Bob Harris, in case you missed that part. And my guest, Laub, John Laub, the Gridiron Scholar. Johnny, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, and good morning. I'm excited to come on. It is Scott Fishbowl season, as I think the whole Twitter world knows, and I'm getting excited for it. I think this is my 8th year now, Bob, in the Scott Fishbowl, so it's incredible, and it's really all about the kids, the toys for tots, and the fantasy cares, but I love participating in it.
Yeah, I can remember. I guess I'm old enough to remember when they were like the number of people involved. I think I remember like 480. I remember. Anyway, good morning, Gladiator Raider. That's an interesting name. Welcome to the broadcast, Wendy. Thanks for coming, Joe Aber, Royal Slade, Albert, Brian. Appreciate everyone showing up. And so I want to get into some of that. You know, there are a few little headlining things that we'll talk about. Hi, Andrea. Thanks for coming. So like and I'm going to tie all this together, but you know, there's some things that with the Scott Fish. So first of all, John and I have both done some mocks, some fishbowl mocks. I know John's brought one of his up. I've done a few and they had gone extremely well until like 2 nights ago. I did one with the Fantasy and Frames crew and I got my proverbial ass handed to me, man. It was brutal. The build I had been using, and like there's, you know, like I'm not saying it's exactly the build I plan to use, but you're trying to throw things. Hey, Alan, thanks for coming. Don't tell Bob. A little ongoing behind the scenes humor there. If you're not in the big group chat that Alan put together, I say congratulations to you. My wrist is vibrating as we speak still from all the notifications. Anyway, but so. I think, you know, this last mock I did, it just reminded me, and I see Mr. Scampers in there. I know Scampers is out there doing a lot of mocks as well. Dame Overboard, I see in some too. I watched one that they were in last night, and I think Scampers is doing something I need to do more of, which is obfuscating. Just, you know, maybe not picking my own spot, picking another spot, seeing how my spot plays out. Yes, Andrea was there as well. It was like a 2.5 hour draft. It was a long draft, but it just went like miserably, and I feel like I needed this, right, John? Because you're sitting there, you go into a bunch of mocks, and every mock had been going my way. I felt like this is my year, and then I get this brutal slap in the face, which I think is a great adjustment. So, first of all, John, what is your spot in the fishbowl? What's your draft position?
I chose number 10, having been in these third round reversals. I think the difficulty, if you have a top 2 or 3 pick and you have to wait that long, it seems like forever from your second pick to the third round. Yes, you do get some positional advantage if you take Jefferson or the quarterback at the top. But that big gap in getting that third and fourth player, I found has been very difficult for me to build. So I prefer to be on the back end between 9 and 12. And in the Scott Fishbowl this year, what I did is, because we didn't know projects, right? We didn't know the scoring format. I chose number 10. That way I feel pretty comfortable that there will be a player that I like at number 10, and I don't have to wait too long into the third round. So I like the back end of these big, really difficult tournament types when I play them.
Yeah, and so I guess that's another question. And so I'm 11. You guys throw in the chat, your draft positions if you want. I'm just curious to see what people chose, and maybe a quick why. I think it's really it's an interesting decision, and like you said, most of us made it before the scoring system came out. I don't know that it materially changes. I took 11. I feel really good about that. I think the third round reversal, for the most part, has worked favorably for me in that position. Coming around and I've been going in most of the mocks I've done. I've been going, not quarterback, right? I've been going position players, trying to go Royal Slate at 5, trying to go, like I've gotten a lot of McCaffrey and Andrews, works out to me, and then I get a pretty good quarterback. In this draft the other night, I did not get the quarterbacks went way quicker. And I guess that's that's going to be the thing to me that determines, and it maybe has me thinking, about how I'm going to approach this. So we'll see. In general, without giving anything away, John, because I know you're a very competitive man, but give it away anyway. In general, what is your, in a league where, like, number one, the scoring is off the charts, so all the positions are benefited. I feel like wide receivers are devalued a little bit, and everyone else is like, and not totally, right, but the other positions are really high. What is going to be your approach with the quarterbacks? Are you going to be hoarding?
So this is a great question. When he came out with the scoring, Scott, I immediately kind of reworked my projections. Like, what are the numbers in this scoring format? And my gut instinct, and what I would like to do, and I've come on a bunch of shows and talked Scott Fishbowl over the years. So Bob, I'm always 100% honest. I'd rather have my viewers beat me than win and not be truthful. In this format, in a perfect world, Bob, I'm going to get 2 quarterbacks at pick number 10 and pick, I think it's 15 or 14. I forget which one. I did that the other night, Bob. I took Justin Fields in the pick 10, and I grabbed Trevor Lawrence in the second round with the third pick. And here's why. I like to force the value of the quarterback position. When people, in general, in my years of doing this, when you grab those 2 quarterbacks, it kind of unnerves some drafters. And it pushes them to take quarterbacks who are good, but you're probably a little bit embracing more risk. And what that does, in my opinion, is it drops receivers and running backs down the board. So I got and this might not ever happen again, but I was very comfortable. I got Nick Chubb in the 3rd round, and I love having Nick Chubb as my starting quarterback because it's a quarter point for carry in this format. And then I came back, and I was ecstatic. I couldn't believe he was on the board. I got Jahmyr Gibbs. In a perfect world, a perfect scenario, I get my 2 quarterbacks and my 2 running backs. I also believe that wide receiver value drops in this format. In tight end premium and 2 quarterback or super flex, wide receiver value comes down the board to you. The question is the tight end. If I have a top 4, I would probably seek that tight end in the 5th round. If I don't, I will probably wait and try to get 2 or 3 sleepers that I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, and so, but some people, you mean, I get nervous at the quarterback situation. And the previous mocks I'd done, I felt no spilkus over the quarterback situation. I was getting one, I was waiting until the 3rd round reversal. I'm picking 11, by the way, and I feel pretty good about that no matter what. I did it before the scoring system. Mr. Scampers chose 2, forgetting about the 3rd round reversal. Joe Hebert thinks picks 5 to 7 seemed the best balance to neutralize the 3rd round reversal. Fair point. Royal Slate at 5. Dame had a great, welcome to the chat there, Dave. Had a great draft last night in a Front Yard Fantasy mock with Jay, who was on here last week, and Joey. That was a pretty interesting draft with Mr. Scampers in there as well, and our friend Jorge Martin, a number of people. I thought it was a very interesting draft. You mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs. Dame got him. I think that's a player I'm going to be targeting heavily. We'll talk about some of these players here. I want to ask you, John, in general, and we have a question here. Let's get to it before we get further into this, into the fishbowl talk and some other things associated with it, right? Which sophomore wide receiver would you draft in the 3rd round, John? I'm thinking who might be there. I guess Drake London's a little later. Who's in the third round that you like a little bit there?
So if we're going Scott Fishbowl, a lot of value comes down. I love A.J. Brown and Amon-Ra St. Brown in the third round of the Scott Fishbowl. Because with these tight end premiums and with the quarterbacks, you will probably get maybe only 4 or 5 receivers in the first 2 rounds. As an example, in this mock, I would be so happy, Bob. I got Chris Olave in the 5th round. I don't think he'll last that long again, but I can always dream. But that is the type of player that might slip down. But if I can get A.J. Brown, I can get Amon-Ra St. Brown. I love those types of players. And I think Stephon Diggs will likely be there in the third round. I would not shy away from Diggs at this point. You know, we know there was a bunch of chatter, 2 weeks ago now with Diggs and unhappiness. I think it'll work itself out, and in the 3rd or 4th round of a Scott Fishbowl, I'm willing to embrace that risk.
Okay, just generally speaking, not in Fishbowl, which are your top second-year wide receivers this year? So obviously Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave are at the top of the heap. After that next range, who are you looking at?
I'm looking at Drake London. He's a type of player. Now, it's kind of ironic because if you drafted me, I know Bob and I have done a bunch of drafts for our magazines. I tend to take Bijan Robinson, which has forced me to not take Drake London because I don't want to double dip in the Atlanta Falcons offense, right? But if I don't get Bijan Robinson, I am really heavily targeting Drake London and or Kyle Pitts. I like both of those pieces at their current value, but Drake London is the wide receiver that I absolutely love, who's a sophomore.
Yeah, I was looking at the underdog best ball ADP right now and looking at some of the players in that range. I think you're looking at as well Christian Watson going fairly high right now.
Oh, I do have a lot of Watson.
So let me ask you about Watson, because in general, I think, there's a lot we don't know about this, and we've talked about this here before. I have some faith that the Packers think they know what they're doing at quarterback. They're not letting Aaron Rodgers out the door if they don't think that they at least have a fighting chance with Jordan Love. That being the case, Christian Watson looked phenomenal. It was a narrow band, but just the size, the speed, the athleticism, all those things. Is that something you're willing to invest in, or you think people are overvaluing him as a wide receiver 3? Is he? Would you like to get him later? I guess that's a stupid question. Of course, you'd like to get him later. Is that a fair price?
I think it's a great price in the 3rd because in our magazine drafts, I think you and I did 5 together. We do so many drafts at this time of the year. I believe I got Christian Watson in 2 or 3 of them, and I usually was getting him in round 5, and sometimes he's my second wide receiver. And I really like his athleticism. I liked him coming out of college. He did even better than I thought. I thought the transition from an FCS program at North Dakota State to the NFL, I thought it would be a greater hurdle. But when did he pop off? Around week 7 or 8, Bob?
Yep.
And he was so good. And what I liked about him, if you watch his long touchdowns and his big plays, he can gain so much yardage. Hey, I'm not sure if Jordan Love is going to be able to remain calm in the pocket and find him on the 40-yard bomb, but I do feel pretty comfortable that Love can hit him on that 10-yard slant, and at that moment, I'll let Christian Watson's athleticism and speed take over, Bob, and I'm very comfortable. I'm happy with him as a second receiver. Perfect world, he's my 3rd receiver.
Yeah, finished just inside that wide receiver 3 range, I think at 35, depending on your scoring system. But you mentioned those big weeks. I think the first one was week 8, the 30-plus points, a couple of 20-ish point games, and a 25-point game. So I do see that upside there. And that was playing with, Aaron Rodgers playing probably one of his worst seasons. So, it wasn't a great season. And so I'm getting to see some questions here, and I want to get on this because I was really excited to see where Dame Overboard got Jahmyr Gibbs last night. So I've started having this thought, right? And it came to me in one of our magazine drafts, and I wrote up in the commentary, and what I wrote was, and Mark Spafford wants us to talk about Gibbs and Montgomery if we would start both as our second and third running back. I think I would start I would start Gibbs as my first running back. Here's my argument, John, and you can slap me in the face and tell me I'm silly, or you can totally agree with me. I'm fine with either. But if we're sitting here and we're projecting Bijan Robinson for having a huge is a first round pick, right? Because the draft capital expended means he's going to command a huge role. Historically speaking, we've seen that. Might I remind you, Jahmyr Gibbs went 4 picks later. And that perhaps the Lions, I don't think they said this outright, but it seemed like they suggested they value Gibbs, if not more, certainly close to where the Falcons valued Robinson. So all those things being true, we can expect a pretty good workload. I get it. Montgomery's there. Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson are there in Atlanta as well, I'll remind you. So great offensive line, super explosive offense. And the thing that kind of got me thinking along these lines was talking to Tim Twentyman, who covers the Lions for the team's official website, but has been covering the team for many years. He said that just early impression was Jahmyr Gibbs was easily the best receiving back he'd seen in Detroit in his 15 years covering the team. Think about DeAndre Swift not being healthy, being a top 20 running back for a couple of years without getting much of a workload. Is it possible we're underestimating Jahmyr Gibbs?
I do think it's possible, especially in PPR scoring formats, Bob. If you go heavy at wide receiver, and what I mean by that, if you take 3 wide receiver build, right, in a PPR scoring format, and you're maybe in the 4th round, I think you could do much worse than Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, when I go back to my fantastic freshman that I wrote for the Football Diehards right after the draft, I projected Gibbs at 625 rushing yards, 50 receptions for 330, and 7 touchdowns. And I want to be conservative, and that was back in April. If you give him even a modest bump, 10% more, then you're probably going to get a player in the top 12 at running back in PPR scoring formats. So I do not think you're wrong. And I will say in my scoring system that I use for grading coming out of college, Jahmyr Gibbs is in the top 3 receivers that I've scouted on film. He was tremendous at Georgia Tech, and I don't know how many people have gone back to watch Georgia Tech, but that's the kind of nerd that I am. And I think Alabama, Bob, unleashed his greatness because Nick Saban and that coaching staff knows how to use running backs. Remember, they had Najee Harris, and Najee Harris is the other great pass catcher in my scouting model and in my film study. So Alabama knows what they're doing. That's why they brought Jahmyr Gibbs in. So it does not surprise me that that's what the beat writer in Detroit said.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting. And just, currently I think he's moved up to about 14 in underdog best ball ADP, which, that feels like about the right spot. So with him working in tandem, because I do think we're going to see some Montgomery, right? It's not like they paid Montgomery that money and he's going to go away. They run the ball really well, but a lot of the running back value last year came from a lot of carries inside the 5-yard line, and Jamaal Williams cashed in on all those. Are we maybe overvaluing the Montgomery half of the split, or maybe we're overvaluing both pieces of this? Maybe they're going to diminish each other a little more than I expect.
This is going to be the fascinating story because I think both of them are going to end up fantasy viable. Montgomery is most likely, if you ask me right now in the red zone, 10 yards and in, who's going to get the carries, I would have to put down on Montgomery. One, we've seen it at the NFL level, and we saw what Jamaal Williams did last year in Detroit. What did he have, 19 touchdowns or something? Or maybe did he hit 20? It was incredible what Jamaal Williams did for the Detroit Lions. Let's say Montgomery gets 3/4 of that. Bob, that would be 15 touchdowns. I mean, that's tremendous. I'll also say, I do not think Jahmyr Gibbs is a monster between the tackles. I think if you spread out the defense, then Jahmyr Gibbs can do well in the tackles. But if you're going like 2 tight end formations and the defense is playing goal line defense, I don't think that's where Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a stud. I think that's where you use Montgomery. So I think at the end of the day, for one of the most explosive, we should have an explosive offense. You just mentioned, I love their offensive line. I mean, that's the key. We can talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown. We can talk about Jared Goff. At the end of the day, the Detroit Lions have one of the top 3 offensive lines in the NFL. in the goal line, don't you want a power back like David Montgomery? And if you're doing the proverbial, end the game, with running the football, I think that's where David Montgomery shines also. So I believe both of them will be top 24 running backs by the end of the season. I would not be surprised. I would not mind Montgomery in a flex and Jahmyr Gibbs is my top running back.
Right. So, I agree with that. And so, if that answers your question, Mark, I think you could play both. Like, there are best balls where I've drafted multiple pieces of the Miami backfield. Number one, they're all dirt cheap, and we expect a pretty good rushing attack. All that could get crushed. And I want to get onto this topic a little bit. Talking to John Laub, by the way, I'm Bob Harris. In case you're just tuning in, this is the Football Diehards YouTube channel. This is our Ask Us Anything. So ask away if you have questions out there. Happy to take it. If you don't follow John on Twitter, you're insane. And you should be smacked. No, you should not be smacked. Nobody should be smacked. And you should follow him instead on Twitter at GridironSkull91. And great work there. You see all his work at Football Diehards. And co-host of what? The rookie big board, is that, John?
Rookie big board. Yep.
Yep. So plenty going on. Nobody more knowledgeable about the college aspect and watching these guys over the course of time. Plays tons of college fantasy football. I think it just gives you this. Look, when you're steeped in information, that's the key. It's not like you're studying. It's just like you're doing it all the time. John is doing it all the time. So if you have Debbie questions or anything along those lines, throw them into the chat. John will be able to help you out more so than I will, because I don't even know what that is. No, I can do kind of that. Robert, I hope you're excited on the Lions, John. The Lions fans are excited. Does Damien Harris have the best chance to be this year's Jamaal Williams? And Brian threw in it with 17 touchdowns, and I was going to say that, but I did not get a chance because Brian beat me to it. So what do you think? Damien Harris. So we had a little chatter this week. James Cook, thinks he's a true RB1, thinks he can handle that role. I don't know that the Bills think he can handle that role, and Damien Harris is there. I've been drafting Damien Harris. He's dirt cheap, right? You're getting him, in some cases, close to, if not in the double-digit rounds. And also his name's Harris. That's a great name. Way to go. Congratulations on that. But what are your thoughts there? Does he have a chance to be that kind of scoring threat, or does Josh Allen put a cap on his scoring potential?
We have read the tea leaves, and I believe the Buffalo Bills have actually stated they would prefer not to have Josh Allen rush the football as much, especially near the goal line. I mean, he's been in the league. I believe this is going to be his 6th season. I mean, it's hard. Sometimes the years go by so fast. And eventually that pounding, even though he's a huge man and he does have some Cam Newton, but look at what happened to Cam Newton with that shoulder, by year 6 or 7, and it kind of, derailed his NFL career. And eventually those hits on the big quarterbacks will add up. So I do believe we saw Damien Harris in 2021. He was the guy for New England near the goal line, and I think he had 1,000 yards, if my memory serves me, right? He had a very good season that. So if you're looking at Buffalo and you're looking at the long-term success of this franchise, I do believe you would like to limit Josh Allen. Maybe he scores 5 rushing touchdowns. Well, how do you ensure the health of Josh Allen? You give the ball to Damien Harris, Bob, especially in the red zone. Harris is good in that role. I don't think James Cook has the bulk and the between the guards. It is a skill. I know I've heard some analysts say it's not a skill goal line. I've watched enough goal line from Marcus Allen to LaDainian Tomlinson, Walter Payton. There is a skill at scoring when you have to deal with, 8 large defenders trying to knock you down. Damien Harris is good at that. So I do believe that there is a limit to James Cook's upside. And I like Damien Harris in best ball a ton, because if he has a 3-touchdown game, I don't have to predict it. I just suck the points up and go with it.
Yeah, Brian, I think the answer is yes. He's had the 15 touchdown season John alluded to. It was right under 1,000 yards. I think it was 900, 929, but it was right there, right? And then, and I think the difference this year for me, and I think Adam Pfeiffer pointed this out a couple weeks ago here on the live stream, that the difference this year is we've heard not just the Bills saying they want Josh Allen to run last. We've heard Josh Allen saying he'd like to run. So maybe they finally pounded into his head. Also, I don't think that they've totally pounded it into his head. When he's out there on the field and and under fire, I think you're going to see him, reverting to some of the things that he's done well, right? It's just, it comes instinctive, I think, for quarterback. And also, it gives them a lot of flexibility in play calling, and it makes the offense a lot more dangerous when you keep the possibility that he's going to be running at the goal line. It can open things up for others and also open things up for him as well. So I totally believe that. While we're on the Bills, there's some talk this week. Let's get it. There's a topic I'm interested in, especially as we, some of us are preparing. We're 2 weeks away, or a little over 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I guess, away from my Scott Fish Bowl draft here in Dallas, the live draft. We're going to be drafting a lot of players not having certainty on where the situations are going to stand, as the season approaches. So just in general, like, we got the Tyreek Hill investigation ongoing right now, right? And we've heard various, spin on that. Like, at some points the investigation's over. Now the investigation's not over. There was apparently video surveillance footage of the incident, what happened, and at some point that's going to come out. And he does have history, and the league can take action on players with history even without things. But let's look at Hill. We've got uncertainty with Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs, although it sounds like it's going a positive direction on Barkley, maybe less so with Jacobs. J.K. Dobbins now has thrown his hat. We thought it was a knee. Now it's money. We've got Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, Kareem Hunt, all going to have landing spots somewhere. We've got a little bit of uncertainty surrounding Joe Mixon now. The report suggesting that maybe he needs to take a pay cut if he wants to stick around. Alvin Kamara, the obvious issues there. We've got guys coming off injuries. Breece Hall, Javonte Williams. I see all these players, most of them, getting drafted. And by the way, Diggs. So there's a Benjamin Albright who, kind of a polarizing guy a little bit, but he's not always wrong. And so I think he was talking on a show in Denver this week saying that the Bills would privately listen to trade offers for Stephon Diggs, right? I mean, we think that issue that arose just went away. I don't know that it just went away. It's not a new issue. It dates back to last offseason. And I think Mike Florio put it right. When you trade for a guy who is disgruntled in his previous spot, don't be totally surprised if he's disgruntled when he hits your spot. So anyway, not to say that anything's going to happen there, but there's enough uncertainty. Where do we sit in drafts right now? Do we just pretend this uncertainty isn't there? I mean, I think we selectively do this, right? I think depending on who the player is, we selectively say, it's worth the risk, right? I think that's the equation in our head. So on some of these players, let's say Barkley and Jacobs, are you just drafting them as if it's a foregone conclusion they'll be playing as usual?
This is a great question, Bob, because I'll say this. I've done, I think, 11 drafts now already, like 3 Best Ball. I did a bunch of magazines with you. We have one on the board right behind Bob there. So I have honestly been staying away from Barkley and Jacobs. It's not that I don't like them. And if you look at my rankings in the magazines, let me pop it up. I have it right here, right now. I do have Jacobs at number 5, and I have Barkley at number 7. So I still like both running backs. But at their value and where they're being selected, they don't seem to be available for a value that I like. So I've been heading in other directions. And if you see us, and go to Football Diehards, the digital magazines are up. You can see what I'm referring to. You have a board right in front of Bob right there. I've been going with what I consider to be more certainty right now. And that's the Nick Chubb area, the Najee Harris area, the Rhamondre Stevenson area. And we could argue for Rhamondre, it's the Belichick factor, right? We never know with Belichick. But I feel pretty good that Rhamondre is the best player in the backfield. Now, Bill might disagree with me, and, we could all lose on that. But I've been going in that direction. Jonathan Taylor, and anyone who follows me knows I love Bijan Robinson this year. So I've been going where I have more certainty. Now, if Barkley was ever there in the 3rd round, or Josh Jacobs, Bob, I'm taking them. I'm going to grab them. But if I'm looking for those 2 first rounds, I'm going with what I perceive to be more certainty this early in the draft process.
Right. And I think, you look right over my shoulder here and kind of see some of the players that, like, I look at that 4th round range, ETN, Pierce, Mixon. You see Mixon in there. And I mean, Mixon would probably be going higher if there was more certainty. And I guess that's the thing to me is how we select, how we pick and choose The players that we're not worried about, like Stephon Diggs, obviously huge upside, right, with Stephon Diggs, regardless. So we're going, Joe Aver throwing in Gabriel Davis could slip into a breakout season with Diggs' uncertainty. I think we all, after a year after overpaying for Gabriel Davis, now getting him at a reasonable price, that would be great as well. But I do think there's something, like, number one, we're drafting everybody. I say this all the time. Everyone we're picking in the first, and, you look at Jacobs going early in the second, you're picking them at or near their ceiling, right? Because that's where you're going to get them. But boy, that uncertainty, I'm kind of with you. I mean, I think I'm being, at this time of year, I'm being a little less risk averse, right? I think I'm playing it a little safer this time of year, and I'll be more aggressive. And I think one of the reasons why I picked that 11 spot in the Scott Fish and why I like drafting at the tail end is it does force me to be more aggressive in drafts. I feel like if I'm at the first turn or close to the first turn, I feel like I'm running downhill. I'm not taking chances. I'm playing it safer. When I'm in that second half, for some reason, I feel like I have to reach a little more. And I feel good about it when I do reach. Like the players I reach for, I feel like, damn, I'm glad I got that guy, even if I overpaid a little bit, especially given some of the drafts. So I mentioned that Scott Fishbowl draft mock I did a couple nights ago where I'm picking 11. And I felt like early in the draft I was doing well because I was being way more aggressive. Right. And then, it went off the rails later on when just started losing out on a lot of players that I really felt like I would have loved to have. But I do think that level of aggression. So I'm trying to figure out the balance. And I mentioned, kind of the uncertain people. I'd like to hear in the chat how are you people mitigating risk? Because I know a lot of you are out there drafting already in the best balls. How are you mitigating these risks? Are you avoiding the situations? Are you swerving? I like to look at it as like I'm driving down the highway and I see a pothole named Saquon Barkley. I can just drive around it over the pothole, over the smooth pavement called Nick Chubb or Tony Pollard or Rhamondre Stevenson, right? Or the range of wide receivers that I feel comfortable with. I maybe feel the same about Devontae Adams now. Like I'm losing a little bit of confidence in him so I can, go down the CeeDee Lamb lane instead, right? So I feel like these are the ways I'm trying to mitigate risk is just by, there seems to be a wide range of players. I'm being more open to that. But I do think how we handle these situations are going to be defined as Mark Spafford put in the chat. Every year a running back comes out of nowhere and helps you to the playoffs. And this is true. I could read you off a list. I have it. I mean, we can go back to when I started playing fantasy football in 1986. Happens every year. So I think for me, John, he wants to know what are some of the candidates for that. I think the candidates for that are the guys who are in the Alexander Madison spot from previous years, right? Somebody who's the lone option or the clear-cut primary option behind a high-volume running back, right? Is that kind of the way you would be looking to identify these players, or do you have some other tactics and techniques you like to use, or some other things you like to look at?
So a lot depends on roster construction, right? And in our magazine's drafts, I've predominantly been going strong running back at the top. However, there's other drafts where I've gone wide receiver or elite tight end early. And if I'm going that roster build, I love players like Kenneth Walker in the 4th round, Bob, J.K. Dobbins, Miles Sanders, Aaron Jones. Those are my running backs, 15 to 17 on my rankings, or 18, I should say. I feel if you can get 2 of those players in rounds 4 or 5, I feel really good. And then what I would do, and you've seen me do this because I use our magazines how I like to build, but I also use it to give readers value. Like, what am I thinking? I like to go running back heavy in those middle rounds, like rounds 8 through 11. I like those rookies like Kendre Miller, Roshan Johnson. Give me a bunch of those guys. And all I need to do, Bob, is hit on one rookie who gets the job by week 8 because of either injury, ineffectiveness, right? And you put that rookie in your flex position all of a sudden, and your team's entirely different. So I have no problem drafting heavily in the rookies in those mid rounds if you're going to go early wide receiver heavy.
Right, I totally agree with that. And I mean, I think some of the backups that maybe it should be on people's radars, the Jerome Ford in Cleveland is one. Maybe Tank Bigsby is someone. I know there are other pieces there, but Tank Bigsby seems to be gaining a little momentum. You mentioned one, Kendre Miller, who I think might be in a good position. But in terms of the backups, I think some of the overlooked ones are guys like Chase Edmonds. At this point, I mean, he is he's the next man up in Tampa Bay, and we'll see what happens there. Maybe they add some other pieces. Keontae Ingram, maybe in Arizona, because James Conner seems like a great, I love James Conner. I think he's going at a great price, but I'm an injury agnostic, but also I can acknowledge that some guys have a tendency to get hurt more than others, and he's one of those, right? So it often happens with running backs. I'm not avoiding him because he gets hurt on occasion. I'm reaping the value on that, but nonetheless, it is a fact that he gets hurt at times. So maybe there's a piece behind him that you can invest in. I think those are the kind of players, Mark, that we're looking at, and just trying to find those potential backups, especially like in Scott Fishbowl, where it's a really deep roster, right, John? You're throwing some darts.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't answer the question totally incorrectly, but I love Antonio Gibson. I've been targeting him in PPR drafts like absolute crazy, and I don't know if he's a backup, but Samaje Perine is still just sitting out there, and until Denver signs another back, he is in line. I would assume he's in line for 15 touches a game right at this point, and he's a pass catcher, so I like him a ton. And I know Zach Charbonnet, if you're drafting Kenneth Walker, I think you need to double dip with Zach Charbonnet, because we know if he goes down, Pete Carroll's going to put Zach Charbonnet on the field, Bob, and I'm going to watch him in DFS. You and I and Emil will probably be talking about in the fall. Zach Charbonnet becomes an automatic plug and play in Seattle and DFS right away if he's the starter in Seattle.
Right. And so some comments in chat. Mr. Scampers, Jeff Wilson Jr. for the fourth year in a row. Totally true. I of all the Miami backs, I think I have the most shares of Wilson because I think seems like the primary guy to me, and he's a little cheaper than A-Chain, who I think is fine, right? And again, I think you can have multiple pieces of that backfield and feel okay about it in best ball. Sean Tucker will be on the Brian Larkin's radar, and clearly he was on the Buccaneers' radar. They paid him a hell of a lot of money as a undrafted free agent. A pretty good guarantee for him. Mr. Scampers, great way to put it, Bob. Shifting lanes for higher volume drafters. I think you should eat the potholes occasionally, and you should. That is 100% true. And I do have shares of some of these risky players, but I think I get to a point where, okay, that's all I need until I gain some clarity, right? Because I think there's value to be had, and I'm always chasing the value. So you see some of these players with these uncertain circumstances. Look, if they're going dirt cheap, I'm all about that, because I'm all about dirt cheap, right? But there comes a point I feel like I've eaten all the potholes I want. I'm full, and I need to drive around some of them so I could still fit through the door. Charbonnet roster worthy, says Joey. I agree with that. Look, that's the history, right, for Pete Carroll. He drafts a second running back. The Seahawks have a lead back. They lean on that guy, but they draft another guy because they know the value of having that guy sticking around. So I totally agree, Charbonnet roster worthy. So I think there is a wide range of guys. Look, there's a reason it's hard to identify these guys, and some of them totally come out of nowhere, right? Totally come out of nowhere. Who I want to think of, like Justin Forsett with Baltimore a couple of years ago. Things that are almost unforeseeable. There's players who are not on teams now who will be on teams or shift teams, and so some of that's difficult. But for right now, I think targeting those those backups in clear-cut situations is probably a good way to help you out and take away a possible handcuff for another manager in your league. I don't think I don't think you have to own be invested in the starter there to invest in the handcuff, as Alexander Madison showed us. And some of these guys have that same Madison upside. You're just not paying the super handcuff premium that we've had to pay for Madison in the past. So some interesting things there. I think it's a great topic because if you've been out there like me, I've been drafting since February, and I know many of you have as well. We don't have clarity. We're drafting, we're flying blind on a lot of these things, and we're hoping for the best outcomes, but we're not always going to get them. So I think you can hit a point where you start changing, and I think it's almost a natural feel that you have. I don't even look at the percentages before I start saying, man, I feel like I have too much of that. Right? I need to look another way. And so I think we'll all be doing that. Wanted to ask you about San Francisco's offense. Article this week, Matt Maiocco from NBC Sports, talked about the possibility that they would be more aggressive offensively, and his arguments had three factors. The versatile star running back Christian McCaffrey, he'll have him from the beginning of the season. to team up with the already great pieces. Look, George Kittle, a great piece. Debo Samuel, a versatile piece. Brandon Aiyuk, a high-end piece. We'll see who the quarterback is. Shanahan has a lot of faith in Brock Purdy, was the second reason after he stepped in the lineup. The 49ers believe Purdy is the present and future of the club, Mayoko wrote. And also, the 49ers will no longer be able to assume anytime they get around the 30-yard line, they have an automatic 3 points now that reliable veteran kicker Robbie Gould is no longer on the team. So here's the thing, though. I feel like all these pieces are fairly, none of them are really cheap, right? Like Brandon Aiyuk is cheaper than the others, but none of them is what you would call cheap. How do you invest in this offense, John? Do you just, I feel like we're not getting great values. I mean, look, you can say Kittle's going at a good price, but is he given within this offense? And we could maybe even say the same with Christian McCaffrey, who you're going to have to burn, he's not making it out of the top 4 or 5 picks in any drafts I'm in.
No, I don't think I've seen McCaffrey slip past 5. I mean, the Scott Fish Bowl,
early on.
He went number 7. Yeah, because I think 4 or 5 quarterbacks. Yes. But other than that, he goes, so you have to pay a very high freight for Christian McCaffrey. Now, my challenge, Bob, is I'm a little bit biased on this. So it's hard for me. I picked up Brock Purdy. I'm with Bob in 2 dynasty leagues. And I picked up Brock Purdy on the waiver wire in both of them last year. So I have an unfair bias. I want Brock Purdy to be the starter so badly. But put that aside. I think you're paying very high freight for all of the assets right now, which tells me the value's in the quarterback. Because we don't know at any given time if Aiyuk is going to go off, Debo Samuel's going to go off. George Kittle's still going to have 3 or 4 monster games, right, by the end of the season. We know if McCaffrey stays healthy, he's going to have that 3-touchdown, 130 yards from scrimmage game. But when they're going to happen, we don't know. But bingo, who's in charge of all of them? It's going to be the quarterback is going to orchestrate that offense. I'm not a believer in Trey Lance and you can go back and read my stuff and that's a different story for another day. I think Brock Purdy has what Shanahan is looking for. He does what Shanahan wants. I think he's a good field general. Shanahan says, here's your progressions. Brock Purdy's going to make the progressions that Shanahan wants. Unfortunately, Bob, we've read reports that are positive, but I believe we have not seen Brock Purdy throw the football, right? We've read that his elbow. Yeah. Oh, we have? Okay. So that's good news.
He has heard him throwing.
Then that's even better. But so I'm a Brock Purdy guy. But I'm biased I do think he fits. And I go back to Shanahan in Atlanta. And that's the MVP year of Matt Ryan. And I watched a ton of Matt Ryan. He might be the last of the pocket passer, right? The old school coming out of Boston College. Why was he MVP and so good? He absolutely orchestrated Shanahan's offense exactly as he wanted. I'm convinced that he sees a little Brock Purdy. And I'm not saying he's the skill level of Matt Ryan because Matt Ryan is a potential Hall of Famer. But Brock Purdy, I think, has basic intellectual football IQ to orchestrate the offense. What Shanahan, and he doesn't say it, so you have to read between the tea leaves. Trey Lance is a freelancer. He's going to take off and run. And I don't think Shanahan likes that. I think he would prefer that Trey Lance goes 1, 2, 3 progressions, and then if he has to run, let him run. But I think Trey Lance, Bob, from my study, and he hasn't played since 2019, he was a see it and run guy. If he saw the throw, he threw it. If he didn't, he was going to use his athleticism. Doesn't mean he can't grow and improve. That's not what I'm saying. But I think Shanahan likes this Brock Purdy robot. I remember reading about I'm going back for the old guys, Tom Landry with Craig Morton and Roger Staubach. And why did he not put Roger Staubach in the game? He loved Craig Morton's robotic offensive game. It was boring, but he did what Landry wanted. But eventually, Staubach was the better player, and he forced himself on the field. And if you read about Landry, it drove him crazy when Roger the Dodger would go off script and start running. And I think that's what Shanahan is similar in Landry. He wants the guy to run his system.
I had to pick up my pencil so I could co-sign on everything John Laub just said. Co-signed 100%. You are 100% correct, John. And I know Scampers and Game Over were seeing the same thing. Look, this is exactly what you outlined. And that, I mean, I think you made the broader point right at the start was like maybe the cheapest piece of all right now is the piece to have, the quarterback, because nobody's drafting them. Dame, I have the same bias, been listening to everything coming out of that team's communications, that Purdy is the guy with healthy. 100% he is. And that's the only question mark there. Is he healthy? And right now, for me, I see enough signs that he is heading towards that direction. Also, he's cheap enough that I don't really care how if it's not week 1 or week 2 or whatever. For every reason that you said, that is 100% true. I will say, I mean, look, I've invested the hell out of McCaffrey. I think he's going to have a really robust, solid role every week. But Elijah Mitchell, when the games Elijah Mitchell was healthy, McCaffrey had fewer touches. There's no two ways about that. He made the most of them, and they might be more premium touches, and so I'm still on board with it. But Debo Samuel, I'm not that in on, right? I mean, I keep asking people, which Samuel scored more last year, Curtis or Debo? And I know Debo missed games, but still, it's shocking to know that Curtis Samuel outscored in PPR and almost in standard scoring, almost non-PPR, he almost outscored Debo Samuel. It was just not a great year for Debo. And you wonder if a lot of that isn't due to Christian McCaffrey's presence or arrival there, that it kind of limits his opportunities, the thing that made Debo great. And so maybe Brandon Aiyuk is the next cheapest piece, is the piece that I probably have more pieces of. So I thought that was interesting. And John, I couldn't agree more. You said it all exactly how I would have said it. Hello, Donnie. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming by. It's been a while, man. So yeah, that was interesting. We have a few more minutes here with the Gridiron Scholar, John Laub. We'll follow him on Twitter at GridironSkull91. Follow me on Twitter at FootballDieHard. John has mentioned numerous times, we've been drafting for the magazines, etc. The 34th edition of the Pro Forecast is printed, available, should be filtering out the newsstands, but if you can't wait, go to FootballDiehards.com and make your purchase there. You can get the digital edition. We're almost done with the Diehards, putting final touches on that, working through it, and we'll do an update on the Pro Forecast there as well. So looking forward to getting those out there. Promo code DieHards, get a 20% discount. That also gets you in. You buy the magazine, you get the August Update Draft Guide, which is a great product. All the pieces that go with that, and we take you into the regular season with the Flash Update, something I've been doing for 30 years now, and tons of information. And also all the technology-based things we have that help you out. My Fantasy GM, you can manage multiple leagues across multiple platforms and kind of get some great intelligence to keep you on track and help you manage those many rosters. It's very useful. Mr. Scampers would like to know, if the Pats miss on DHop and make a move for Dalvin, what, where, how of Rhamondre and Cook at that point? Why did you do that, Scampers? Everything was going so well for us.
Oh, that would torpedo all my Rhamondre. I think I have him in 3 leagues already, maybe 4. If everyone sees me looking down, my lovely dog Mora just came in and she demands attention. So I'm just trying to give her petting. That's why I'm looking down. Obviously, Dalvin Cook would probably play well in New England, but it would torpedo that Rhamondre Stevenson share, because Belichick could easily go 40-40 and then have a third, wide pass-catching running back in that rotation. But I am hopeful that DeAndre Hopkins ends up in New England. I mean, Bob, is there really a depth chart at wide receiver that is more desperate for a wide receiver than New England? I mean, maybe they're in the bottom 3. I mean, no matter how you look at it. So I would like Hopkins to end in New England. A, it wouldn't torpedo any of my other shares of the other receivers I bought. And B, it might help New England and maybe Mac Jones get that passing game. I mean, I know they got Gesicki. They're trying to make pieces happen. I'm not as confident right now that they have the right, pieces in place. But Hopkins would change everything if he signed in New England. And I think from a fantasy perspective, that is the best place we could hope.
Yeah. And so I think Diana Rossini is saying this week that Hopkins is in no hurry. He's only had 2 visits, right? And so I think he and Dalvin Cook are going to take their time. Some of these other players are taking their time already. We'll see a lot of more talk of buzz about Elliott, maybe, buzz. A lot more of Dak Prescott saying that he'd love to have Ezekiel Elliott back in Dallas. I think that door is still open. Everyone's starting to come to grips with the devaluation of running backs. We heard Melvin Gordon talking about it this week as well on Jim Rome's radio program.
Yeah, that was good.
It is what it is. But these guys are going to maybe be a little more. I think if the money is not going to be there, why not be super patient and just wait for the exact right landing spot, right? Because things are going to develop in training camp. I mean, Dalvin Cook still thinks he wants $10 million. I don't know that he'll get that, but maybe he gets closer to that if there's a huge injury somewhere, and we'll find out. So, and it does seem like, if Donnie mentions DHop coming to England, we'll see. But it seems like that's, to me, of the 2 options he has right now, that's obviously the better option, or I would think it's a better option than Tennessee. There have been other teams that have kind of nibbled around the edges on that. Seems like he wants too much money. Kansas City, Buffalo. I've heard talk to Stephon Diggs. That's one of the reasons for his irritation is, he reworked the deal or something. And he thought they should land Hopkins. Also heard he was irritated at play calling. Also heard he was irritated just because he likes to be irritated. Much like me. I can be mad because I can get mad. I think the thing we all know for sure is that somewhere these running backs, whether it's Cook, whether it's Kareem Hunt, even, I mean, someone's going to land somewhere that crushes the values of players that we already anticipated. And I don't know why I keep thinking, and this is just me making it up, is that I'm not making it up. I've heard it float around out there. Kareem Hunt back to Kansas City, right? The time heals all wounds, and so he was very successful there. So just somewhere these guys are going to end up, and it's going to be somewhere that maybe surprises us, and we're not going to be entirely happy about. One of the dangers of drafting early, right? That's part of the fun of all this. You're drafting early, things are going to happen. So we'll see. Leonard Fournette still floating around out there as well. So all those pieces are possibly game changers for the guys we've already drafted, and I'm here for that. It's a ton of fun, people. That's how this works. So going back to some of the injured players, John, let's go with the Javonte Williams. You mentioned Samaje Perine. He still seems to have gone crazy cheap. What is it about this? Or are people not trusting the offense, or they have high hopes for Williams? Where are you at on Perine? When are you willing to draft him?
I'm sorry, my dog just barked a little bit.
That's okay.
I think it's the narrative around Perine. I think he was a 2017 NFL draft pick. He ended up going to Washington, and I was high on him coming out of Oklahoma. And I thought he had an opportunity to capture that backfield for the Commanders, and it didn't work out for him. And then he went to Cincinnati. I think he went to Miami for a short bit, too, at one point. I don't know if he ever actually saw the field in Miami. And he ends up in Cincinnati, and Joe Mixon has been the guy for the Bengals. But if you watch the Bengals and you opened up your eyes, Perine was pretty good as a backup. And I know I played him in DFS late in the season over the last 2 years. And what really impressed me with Perine is his pass-catching ability. He has more receptions than people think. And I'm a believer in Sean Payton. From Mark Ingram to, Alvin Kamara, their running backs in that system has been very productive fantasy-wise. So, Bob, I think it's the narrative or the perception is outweighing the reality. Right now, the reality is Samaje Perine is the healthiest running back at the top of the depth chart. Who's the only other? Tony Jones, the Notre Dame prospect, who I think he was with Sean Payton in New Orleans before. I don't have a ton of confidence in Javonte Williams, at least playing the first 6 weeks of the season. I love the value of Perine. I think people have to get over the narrative, and they have to open their eyes that right now, Perine in the 9th round, I think, is a steal. Yes, could Dalvin Cook come in? Yeah, but I like Perine, and I think Peyton isn't. Do they really think they're going to win a Super Bowl this year? Get your running back in next year's draft, Bob, and just slog through with Perine, and maybe Javonte Williams is healthy by the end of the year. So I like Perine. Just you got to open your mind that he might be the guy in New Orleans.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because Sean Payton has essentially said, in Denver, yeah, we knew. Payton has essentially said, even when Williams is back, Perine's still going to have a role, and he does have that long history of using multiple backs. By the way, many people saying, let the dogs be dogs, Dame overboard, put it like that. Bark away, pups, I agree, and I'm cat people. I believe Mr. Scampers might be cat people, too. So the dogs are allowed. We're fully fine with that as well. Hi, Steve Atwood. Thanks for coming. Appreciate your time. John, Robert Farrick wants to know, how did you end up doing in DFS last year?
Oh, I mean, I was profitable, and that's what the most important thing to me is at the end of the year. I think my best year, and I've done the scholar sheet of DFS knowledge for the last 6 or 7 years for the Football Diehards. I keep all my records and how my results are. I think my best year profit-wise was 2020, but I did have a profitable year last year. I had some great, huge weeks. Other weeks, if you play DFS, you're going to be up and down. But I feel like I put together a solid lineup and help our readers every week go through the DFS conundrum. And I do post 2 articles I post it on Friday, and I come back Sunday morning with an updated lineup, because we've all been there, Bob, right? The Saturday night news. So I want our readers to always have the most information available by Sunday morning at 9 a.m. on the East Coast. But yeah, I was profitable, and I hope everyone who follows me at least made a profit and did well last year. I think they did.
Yeah, I love Jeff Mans to re-upping his Core 4 on Sunday mornings during the pregame show, and everyone's screaming and howling like, how can you update? Well, you have to update. There's new information, people. Overboard would like to know, please tell me who the Commanders quarterback is so I can draft accordingly. I will tell you who it is. It's going to be Sam Howell. I could see a world where he comes up short and they make the switch to Jacoby Brissett at some point. I don't know, what their their vision for this season is or expectations are. But I do think, John, and you can maybe address this, he ran the ball pretty well in college. I think from a fantasy perspective, that's what I'm hoping for. I'm starting to draft him as my 3rd quarterback in best balls. He and Desmond Ridder are, on my radar now. But Howell, the preferred choice because of his running ability. He was a pretty good ball carrier his last year in college, correct?
Absolutely. He had over 800 yards rushing. He's not a Lamar Jackson type runner, but he's a proficient mover of the chains with his legs. I think in the one game he had over 30 yards rushing, and he scored a rushing touchdown. I think they played Dallas, right? Week 17 or something, or 18 last year. He showed us what he can do with his legs. Bob, I agree with you. I did a shorts with Amel that is up on Football Diehards, the YouTube page now, way back, I think in early April, maybe late March. And I identified Sam Howell as one of the best sleepers. I love his price. I like him as a 3rd running back, and it's strictly related to his ability to score points with his legs. But Bob, everyone likes Terry McLaurin, and Jahan Dotson's a sleeper, and Antonio Gibbs is a nice pass catcher, and no one's talking about Sam Howell. He should start, Bob, unless it's a disaster. Right. If they're 0-7 and he's then you go with Brissett, I guess. But why would you not play the young man? See what you have at the quarterback, and he has some pieces around him.
Right, and if it's not going well, then you're heading towards tanking territory anyway, and that's great. I'm just now seeing a notification about Eric Bieniemy making his presence felt. Hopefully that's working in Sam Howell's favor as well. But I'm with you. I kind of like some of the associated pieces that I mentioned Curtis Samuel a little earlier. I had talked to David Harris from Locked On Commanders podcast. The last couple of weeks, I've had a couple chances to talk to him, and he's pretty high on the receiving core. And I think one of the things I tried to learn from last year was not to overestimate the impact of quarterback play on the wide receivers. And I think McLaurin, it looks like a value. Jahan Dotson looking like a value. And certainly Curtis Samuel going super late in drafts. And I love that, the super lateness there. And also Cole Turner. Shh, don't tell anybody.
You're right. Cole Turner's a good It's a good one.
Don't tell anybody. Well, I mean, honestly, I think Logan Thomas is still the better pick, but when you're in the last round of that best ball, you're throwing that dart. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot, everybody, for coming. I appreciate your time. You have choices out there. I see many of you making them choices. I'm making those choices with you. Tons of content on YouTube. We appreciate you coming to the Football Diehards channel to spend a little time. Hit that subscribe button if you have not already. Hit the like button if you did not yet. Or hit the dislike button if you don't like me. It's okay. I'm all right with that. I'm an old man. A lot of people don't like me. But listening to us on the radio tonight, a Simulation Saturday, which is the new Mock Draft Monday. It'll be who's with it? Oh, Pat Fitzmaurice from Fantasy Pros and Gary Davenport, the great one, will be joining us again for a Simulation Saturday. We'll do an 8-round mock draft. Each of us will be taking on 3 teams and blistering through a draft and kind of talking through it as we go along. So good luck on that. We're going to work up a Scott Fish mock draft here. I don't know if it'll be Wednesday, probably next Saturday. So figure all that out. And so no teams tonight, Dollar Bill. We'll just be mock drafting. Thanks for coming, Dame. Thanks for coming, Andrea. Go to footballdiehards.com, get stuff. Use the promo code DieHards to get